life and habitats of Papahānaumokuākea from the threats of marine debris. And as Pikake mentioned, I'm joined today by my teammates Derek Lavault and Andy Sullivan Haskins. And our talk story session is titled Mechanizing Marine Debris Management, Grappling Ghost Nets with New Gear, Gadgets, and Gizmos. And so I'll kick us off by introducing Papahānaumokuākea, its unique wildlife, and the impacts of marine debris, as well as why we created PMDP. And then Derek will discuss the innovative tools, technologies, and engineering solutions we've developed to help detect, cut, lift, and remove massive ghost nets from the remote coral reefs. Then Andy will discuss media education and the science of storytelling and how these tools can inspire community-based stewardship and conservation action. And so as we go through this talk, please think of questions you'd like to ask at the end, or please place them in the chat. All right. So to understand the scale of our work, it's really helpful to understand where we work. And so let me introduce you first to the U.S. National Marine Sanctuary System. This system consists of 18 marine protected areas encompassing more than 629,000 square miles of U.S. ocean and Great Lakes waters. And what's remarkable is that Papahānaumokuākea alone accounts for more than 92% of the entire National Marine Sanctuary System by area. And it's one of the largest marine protected areas on Earth and one of the most important marine conservation areas in the United States. And as you can see on this map, Papahānaumokuākea makes up the northwestern portion of the Hawaiian archipelago and accounts for nearly 75% of the entire length of the Hawaiian Island chain. And all of these islands were formed by the same volcanic hotspot responsible for creating the 8 main Hawaiian Islands that we know today. And over millions of years, the Pacific plate slowly moved northwest at a rate of 9 centimeters per year, carrying each island farther away from the hotspots where it was formed. And so the farther northwest you travel, the older the islands become. And as these islands aged, they gradually subsided beneath the ocean surface, while coral reefs continued to grow around them. And over millions of years, what were once towering volcanic islands became low-lying atolls, sandy islets, and expansive shallow coral reef systems. And so today at our organization, PMDP conducts marine debris removal operations across 7 of the 10 major islands and atolls within Papahānaumokuākea. And one of the biggest challenges when talking about Papahānaumokuākea is helping people understand how remote it is. And so from Honolulu to Holaniku at the end of the chain is over 1,300 miles, roughly the same distance as driving from Los Angeles to Dallas. And once we arrive there, there are no ports, no fuel docks, no hardware stores, no hospitals, or nearby rescue services. And so every gallon of fuel, every piece of equipment, every spare part, and every contingency plan must travel with us. And that remoteness is one of the reasons these ecosystems remain so pristine, but it's also one of the reasons why conservation work here is so challenging. And what makes Papahānaumokuākea uniquely special is not only its ecological significance, but also its cultural importance. It's the only UNESCO World Heritage Site in the US recognized for both its natural and cultural resources. And so in native Hawaiian tradition, the Hawaiian archipelago is divided between Ao, the realm of light and living, where we reside today, and Po, the ancestral realm from which life emerged and to which spirits return. And Papahānaumokuākea occupies the sacred realm of Po. And for many people, conservation is about protecting biodiversity, but here in Hawaii, conservation is also about protecting genealogy, identity, culture, and place. And Papahānaumokuākea is not simply a collection of islands and reefs, it's an ancestral landscape deeply connected to Hawaiian creation stories, including the Kumulipo, or the Hawaiian creation chant. And its name honors Papa, Earth Mother, and Wakea, Sky Father, who gave birth, Hanau, to the Hawaiian Islands, Moku, and the Hawaiian people. So Papahānaumokuākea. And this perspective reminds us that the work is not simply about removing debris, it's about caring for a place of profound ecological and cultural significance. Because these islands are so ancient, they're surrounded by vast expanses of shallow coral reef habitat. To give you some perspective, the combined land area of all the islands within Papahānaumokuākea is about 6 square kilometers, roughly the size of LAX, or LA International Airport. Yet surrounding these tiny islands are thousands of square miles and square kilometers of shallow coral reefs. In total, Papahānaumokuākea contains more than 3.5 million acres of coral reef habitat and over 70% of all coral reefs found within the United States. So imagine Kaneohe Bay here on Oahu, but scaled up thousands of times. These reefs form an incredibly complex maze of coral structures, channels, shoals, and shallow reef flats that support one of the most intact marine ecosystems remaining on Earth. And the wildlife. Papahānaumokuākea is home to more than 7,000 species of marine life, and approximately 1/4 of those are found nowhere else on Earth. And among those 7,000 species, 23 are federally protected, endangered, or threatened species. That includes 75% of the Hawaiian monk seals remaining on Earth and about 96% of the Hawaiian green sea turtles, which return to a single atoll, Lalo, and more specifically, 2 small islets that are no bigger than a couple football fields to nest and reproduce. And Papahānaumokuākea is also home to over 14 million seabirds, representing 22 species. And perhaps the most iconic is the moli, or the Laysan albatross. At Kauai Hilani alone, there can be as many as 3 million albatross, which is about 2,000 albatross per acre. And when we talk about endangered species, we're not talking about abstract statistics. For many of these species, Papahānaumokuākea is not just important habitat, it's the habitat that determines whether populations recover or decline. And so now that you can see what an extraordinary place Papahānaumokuākea is, let's talk about one of its greatest threats. So the Hawaiian archipelago sits in the center of the North Pacific Ocean and directly in the North Pacific subtropical gyre, a massive system of oceanographic currents that circulate water around the Pacific Rim. And these currents move nutrients, marine life, and unfortunately, marine debris across vast distances. And to appreciate the scale of Hawaii's isolation, you can see the Hawaiian archipelago overlaid on the continental US. We are thousands of miles from major population centers, yet because of ocean circulation, we are connected to human activity across the Pacific. And many people have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. What receives less attention is the subtropical convergence zone, a broad band of buoyant debris stretching thousands of miles across the North Pacific. And as this debris drifts through the Hawaiian Islands, Papahānaumokuākea's shallow reefs acts like a giant comb, capturing this floating debris from across the Pacific. And the result is accumulation of large quantities of abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear, commonly known as ghost nets. And in 2005, NOAA estimated that approximately 115,000 pounds of ghost nets accumulate on the reefs of Papahānaumokuākea each year. And that estimate does not include the additional debris that's accumulating on the beaches and shorelines. And these nets can be incredibly destructive. And so once the net settles on the reef, they overgrow with algae and marine life, they gain weight, they sink onto the living coral, and the result is smothered coral, damaged habitat, and ongoing risks to wildlife. And these nets can be enormous. The largest net our team has ever removed weighed over 23,000 pounds. And to put that into perspective, that's roughly the weight of 6 Toyota Tacomas. And imagine finding something that large wrapped around a living coral reef more than 1,000 miles from the nearest harbor, and then trying to figure out how to remove it without causing further damage. And ironically, these ghost nets can also become artificial ecosystems. Algae grows on them, small fish seek shelter within them, and then large predators are drawn in. Eventually, turtles, monk seals, and other wildlife become entangled. And over the last 5 years, our team has directly rescued and disentangled 17 Hawaiian green sea turtles and 3 Hawaiian monk seals from marine debris. And those are just the animals that we found in time. Many others are not as fortunate. But every rescue also reminds us why prevention is so important, because the best disentanglement is the one that never has to happen because the net was removed before the animal encountered it. And that reality is why we created the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Project in 2019. Our goal is simple. It's to remove marine debris before it can harm wildlife and habitat. In 2022, we launched what we call the Catch Up and Keep Up initiative. Historically, federal managers attempted to remove roughly the 115,000 pounds of new debris each year to keep pace with the annual accumulation. However, years of limited funding and access allowed an estimated 1 million pounds of marine debris to accumulate on the reefs. When we looked at the problem, we realized we couldn't simply maintain the status quo. We needed to catch up by eliminating the 1 million pound backlog while simultaneously keeping up with the 115,000 pounds of new debris arriving each year. And to do that, we needed innovation. And so we identified three major bottlenecks limiting our ability to remove more debris. The first was detection. Finding nets scattered across thousands of square miles of remote coral reef habitat consumes enormous amounts of time, energy, and resources. It would literally take us all year using traditional swim and towboard survey methods to survey and clean all of the reefs within Papahānaumokuākea. The second is cutting. Some of these ghost nets weigh tens of thousands of pounds and can take days of diving and cutting underwater before they can be safely removed. And lastly, lifting. Many nets are simply too large to cut efficiently, yet the shallow reef environments prevent us from using conventional fishing vessels and heavy recovery equipment. And so when most people think of marine debris removal, they imagine divers collecting trash underwater. But when the debris weighs tens of thousands of pounds and is spread across one of the most remote marine environments on Earth, traditional approaches quickly reach their limits. If we can improve how we detect, cut, and lift marine debris, we can dramatically increase the amount of habitat protected and wildlife saved. And that's exactly what Derek and our innovation team have been working on. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Derek Lavault to discuss innovative tools, technologies, and engineering solutions that are helping transform marine debris removal in Papahānaumokuākea.
Oh, you're muted, Derek.
Okay. Thank you, Janice. Tammy, I'll point out that guy on the left there, Ryan Naluai, a product of Kailua High, right there. 3-4's very own. My name is Derek Lavault. I'm the quartermaster at PMDP. I'm here to talk to you about some of the technology and innovation that we're using to help detect and remove marine debris, thanks to our funding and partnership with UHC Grant. I'm going to try to speed through it because I want to leave time at the end. I was going to say to put yourselves in our shoes and ask some questions, let your curiosity run wild, but really, I guess maybe put yourselves in your students' shoes, your fellow teachers' shoes. You would know better than me what the things you need to know about this are. So I'll try to hit you with some background information and then leave some time at the end. So James just spent the last few minutes telling you about some crazy problems we deal with and our crazy program. So I'll tell you about the crazy people that do it. We got Jesse Spaceman Mounier and Owen Pyle, a couple of engineers, one from Stanford, one from Cal Poly. There's Lauren Fraser with lots of field experience and our president, Kevin O'Brien, right there. And I want to point them out because one of the first things an engineer needs to learn is to listen to the people that have done the thing before. And that's these two right here, as well as your very own James Morioka right here, spinning up some synergy and making things happen with a whole squad of technicians. And I don't just bring up all this as like a sappy tribute to our team. I really believe that there's a correlation between the quality of our engineering and the engagement we have with the team. And it's not just because they bring a different set of specialties and skills. You've probably seen this stuff as teachers, but when you can get all the people to work together, there's just a shift in the way you work and the energy you bring to the project. You don't get rigid or stuck on fixated on your particular idea. You also don't feel the burden of the thing as much. You just get things made more quickly, more magic happens. And so I just wanted to start my portion of the presentation by bringing this up and crediting these people. And because it's not necessarily an engineering type idea, that it's actually a people problem or a people issue. But we can spend the rest of the time, if you want, talking about, I don't know, gear ratios and torque specs or something like that. But I had to acknowledge them from the beginning. And our team extends beyond just PMDP. You can see we're fortunate, of course, to have UHC Grant as well as some other universities, nonprofits, and engineering firms who have helped us out. Pretty much anybody that'll answer one of my emails will take help. Okay, so that's who we are. Here's where we do our thing. So this is our workbench here. You got the soldering station, probably some fire hazards, some various microcontrollers. Here's a 3D printer, good for prototypes. If you like colorful things like me, this is a good tool. I was joking about the fire hazards too earlier. CNC, pretty good setup. In fact, it's probably more powerful than my brain can really handle. It's a machine known for its willingness to make a mess, but they can help you make cool parts too. And then we can turn those cool parts into cool equipment. We have some other metalworking tools. James was talking about the speed of tectonic drift. That's about how fast this bandsaw works, but it's nice to have a good friendly guy like that around the shop. Drill press, again, not glamorous. It doesn't have like a screen or anything, but it shows up and it's there for you every day. Something to be said for that. Hand tools. Honestly, there's probably plenty of people here that could make some magic happen with just opening these drawers. And the 12-inch, 15 amp DeWalt dual bevel sliding compound miter saw with adjustable table. I don't really have anything to say about it. I just wanted to say the whole name. It's a cool tool. And then my favorite, the leaf blower. You know, you got a leaf blower, a shop vac, you can do work anywhere. All right, so that just kind of gives you an overview of the facility that we have here to work with. And we can get into the life cycle of our innovation. How does a new tool come to be? Well, you start with the problem, which obviously in this photo, Charlie's hoisting up this big net, which used to be part of a even bigger, enormous net. And so you can just clearly see the faster we can get those things cut and lifted, the more we're going to be able to get. So the first thing we do is look for an existing solution, because if it's already available and somebody else has solved the problem, well, you can save 6 months by just tapping buy now. And this is one of the first ones that we tried. Bamboo cutter, tried a hydraulic cable cutter, an underwater reciprocating saw. We tried all these and tons more, and they all show potential, but they all sort of have one little like fatal flaw or something that precludes their use. This wire saw, for instance, it would be great at cutting nets, but it weighs 1,000 pounds and works on a ship's hydraulic power. So, that's not really going to help Charlie on the beach. But could we make something similar? And this is kind of where the whole thing begins. Yeah, we could. We could make a wire saw like that. And so all the engineers I talk to, you start with sketches. They just say sketch anything, sketch everything. Just get it out, down on any paper you got. We'll throw out an idea, samurai sword. We don't care. Sketch it out. Let's see. And then just get going. The MVP, the minimally viable product. Just make something quick. And at first, I thought that this might be the trickiest thing to relate to academia, because you're not trying to get an A on this thing. You just got to get it done quick. The A you need to get on version 10. Version 0, just quick. But it actually might be more relatable to a school setting, because anybody could have made this. And this is the beginning. This is how the thing starts. So just bring it to life. And I'll probably try to continue to point that out. A lot of tech pioneers make stuff they know isn't going to work, but it's the way that the iterative process works. Like SpaceX, Lockheed Skunk Works, any app or software you've ever used went through some sort of prototype period. They just did fail forward fast. They build, they test, they iterate. They just don't stall. All right, so once your project has a pulse, then we can begin to talk more seriously about different subsystems. And to go back to the beginning, here's also why the people are important and why you bring malasadas to the meeting or something like that. It's good to have friends, right? Because nobody is going to know how to do the mechanism and the electronics and the housing and the accessories. Ain't nobody got time for that. You got to be able to spin that Rolodex, find some people, and unless you know somebody that's on God mode that can do all this, you can break the subsystems down. Or electronics, for example. Here would be the electronic subsystem. So we know our engineering requirement, like we're going to try to make this wire saw. So we know how fast we need the thing to spin and how much power it has to go. So you go find that motor. Once you find the motor, you can find the battery to power it. And once you can find the battery to power it, you can figure out how to do the wiring. And again, you start simple. Maybe eventually you add those screens and the buttons and stuff, but it all starts simple. And then once you get all those components together, you put it together. So here's the little wire saw we made. You take it out in the field and then you break it immediately. It probably faces some sort of harsh reality and you fix it. You make it better. And that's sort of the process. That's the way it goes. So let's show you some of the things that we've made through that process. So with the Nets axe here, we got Kevin O'Brien. And again, there's your minimally viable product. You can see it's just 3D printed. So this one worked with two opposable blades. So even if the net snags on a blade going one way, well, there's another blade coming the other way that's going to cut it. And these are just 3D printed, so they wouldn't cut anything. But again, we made it quick and it demonstrated the concept. And then eventually it becomes this big tool, which you can go out and then go break in the field and fix it better. The saw is everything. A similar thing, it was just an off-the-shelf tool to which we added a mechanism so that you could cut further. The Hacky Chan, just another longer cutting mechanism. So it started as a benchtop tester so that we could get some data on different rigs and different cutting methods. And we still use that data, but then we were able to take that and adapt it to something we could use out in the field. And this is some barracks up on Kauai where we just finished a field mission. And this is kind of that fail forward fast in the field, what it would actually look like. So, I mean, you can see we got the net axe and there's a wire saw over there on the right. Just trying to fix fix all the little problems that came up, make the thing go. And those are kind of small problems that I can house in basically one little room. Here's our biggest thing we got going. It's an extraction platform, basically a pontoon barge with winches to safely remove large debris. Got a bow gate, a drop gate there in the front. But it follows the exact same process. So we start with Owen, our engineer, sketched up a concept, and then we made one, an MVP, minimally viable product. Whipped it up with a bunch of 55-gallon drums, some plywood, got it out in Kaneohe Bay, and you're able to quickly answer a whole bunch of questions, much cheaper than a naval architect would, and probably more accurately even. And then from there, you do hand it over to the naval architect. He can turn that into blueprints. So that's where we are now on the extraction platform and just starting to roll out those subsystems. We got our trailer built and modified, got the pontoons on it. So that was cutting and lifting, like James mentioned. So on to detection, the Scooty-Doo project. So like James said, Papahānaumokuākea is a huge place, and we're nearing the keep up side of catch up and keep up. So the debris is going to take more effort to locate. Right now, we do a lot of swimming. So we built some scooters to help us with that, get them in the test phase, and continue to fix the glitches and even understand what our requirements for the thing are. The eye in the sky. This is Andy Sullivan Haskins, who's going to speak next. And actually, I know you're going to have questions. Wait till you hear Andy's talks. It's really good. And he's our drone pilot also. He's put in a whole lot of work to learning to detect debris, navigating literal and figurative obstacles in the world of drones. So you'll have a lot of good questions for him about that. He also, with Dr. Sol Milne of ARRI, helped train a AI net detection software to help find debris. And then we've got satellite detection, also kind of a nascent program here at PMDP. And it's one that you could direct all questions to James Morioka about. And lastly, I just wanted to also, so here's some of Andy's art, but I wanted to say that STEM is really good for everybody. I was trying to think of, if you're a physics teacher or something, well, your students are already interested in STEM, but Owen, our excellent engineer, he applies his talents to all sorts of things. So even in art, he came up with a good way to easily hang the pictures and make frames and everything. So there's lots of application for it. And yeah, I hope you got a lot of good questions. I'm going to turn it over to Andy. He can explain this art.
Cool. Thanks, Derek. Okay, do I have everybody? So my name is Andrew Sullivan Haskins. I'm the expedition visual storyteller with the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Project. This is a Hawaiian monk seal.
Andy, I'm going to cut you off real quick. Can everybody see his screen? Oh, okay. Sorry.
All good? Okay. This is one of the most endangered marine mammals on Earth, with around 1,600 left in the world. And this one is young, it's healthy, and it's resting on a beach in Papahānaumokuākea National Marine Sanctuary on Holaniku. The seal has no idea of what this single object represents. Wildlife is attracted to this debris. It's seeking shelter, shade, comfort, and often a sense of security. The animal isn't in danger from this particular piece of buoy, this fishing float, but the debris is there. And that gap between the animal's innocence and the reality of its world is the whole story. So I take a lot of pictures, often thousands a day, but I use very few of these images. When I see a moment like this, I just start shooting. These moments are fleeting, and capturing an impactful image, an image worth keeping and sharing, can be a challenge. And these are some of the frames that I like to keep. I keep these because I think it does something a graph or a statistic can't do. It makes you feel something before you know what to do. And that feeling is where conservation begins. So Papahānaumokuākea is one of the largest marine protected areas on Earth. It's a place most people globally haven't even heard of. This is what it looks like with protections in place. Now imagine what it could look like without. I've been lucky enough to visit Papahānaumokuākea every year since 2014.
Hey, Andy, your audio cut out.
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you loud and clear
Hello?
now.
You got me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I was talking about working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the state of Hawaii, and now with the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Project as a filmmaker and photographer. My experiences in Papahānaumokuākea have shaped how I see this work and honestly, how I see everything. The debris problem here is not metaphorical. The Northwest Hawaiian Islands act as a giant net in the Pacific, a terminus for the world's waste. Ghost nets, buoys, floats, derelict fishing gear, and an endless variety of anthropogenic waste. It accumulates on reefs, beaches, and in the water column constantly and kills an unimaginable amount of wildlife every single day. PMDP removes hundreds of thousands of pounds of this debris on every expedition, and so far, 1.28 million pounds since 2020. This is the tension I work against every time I pick up a camera. This is happening in one of the most remote and restricted places on Earth. The public can't go there, most journalists can't go there, yet I can. And that access is rare, and that rarity is the whole reason the storytelling matters. My job is to be the eyes for everyone who can't be there, bring the place to the people, and tell the story of what is happening there in its rawest form. That responsibility shapes every choice I make behind the lens. So I want to talk a little bit about how I actually think about this work, because I think there's something transferable here, especially for people in this room who teach students how to communicate. Shock value versus interpretive space. The first instinct in conservation photography is shock. Show the worst of it, the dead animal, the tangled reef, the dead coral, the pile of garbage. The problem is real and it's ugly, but shock has a ceiling. You can show someone a dead entangled animal and they feel terrible for a moment and then they move on. There's nowhere for the mind to go. It's an endpoint. A living animal near danger is a different story entirely. It's an open question. The viewer fills in the space. That's where emotional investment actually happens. When someone arrives at the feeling themselves, rather than having it handed to them. So I use composition as a tool, not a decoration. Split shots, frames within frames, working in black and white when color would distract are all tools borrowed from fine art photography and applied to documentary work. Professional framing creates the illusion of beauty. The beauty draws people in, and then the discomfort of the story does the work. The image feels like it should be comfortable, and it isn't, and that's intentional. Nothing I shoot is staged. Everything is framed, and there's an important difference. The scene is real. The discipline is how you shoot, how you choose to show it. So scale through human context. A net draped over the coral says, here, look. A free diver next to that same net says, look at the scale, look at the task. and look at what the stakes are. The presence of a person transforms an image from a record into a narrative. I like to use something called the unconventional hero shot. When I put a person in the frame, it's never about the person. A diver next to a ghost net isn't a portrait, it's a scale reference. The hero in that image isn't the diver, the story is. The goal is images that are hauntingly beautiful, that pull you in and then make you uncomfortable. That gives you room for something to sit with. So I want to talk a little bit about something that feels more urgent now than it ever did, even 5 years ago. And it's relevant to anyone in this room who's thinking about how to teach science communication. We're in a moment where access to remarkable places and remarkable science is increasingly being used as personal content. Scientists, conservationists, researchers, people with genuine credentials and real access are framing themselves as the story. The expedition becomes a backdrop, the animal becomes a prop, the work becomes a vehicle for building a following. I want to tread a little carefully because reach matters, and getting people to care about conservation is hard. And any path that works has real value. I'm not dismissing that. But there's a nuance we're sitting with. When you have access to something rare, a protected ecosystem, an endangered species, an indigenous space, the way you use to choose that access carries weight beyond your follower count. I like to think of it like a David Attenborough principle. Think about David Attenborough, 50 years of wildlife filmmaking, the most recognized voice in nature documentary history. If he had spent his entire career walking up to every endangered species, picking it up and making himself the centerpiece of every frame, he wouldn't be David Attenborough. The restraint is in the work. The discipline of getting out of the way is what gives the work authority. Real conservation isn't about you taking a selfie with an animal. This is true in wildlife documentation. It's true in conservation spaces, and it's especially true in indigenous spaces like Papahānaumokuākea, where those who hold the camera, how they frame what they see, and what the story they center has real cultural and political stakes that go well beyond the image itself. The question worth teaching students isn't how do I build a platform? It's what my platform is for. Those are two different projects. One is about growth, and the other is about purpose. Be intentional. Point the camera at the work and let the work tell the story. I want to talk briefly about where this work goes, and it's not to list accomplishments, but to make a point about what intentional work can do. So our imagery has appeared in Oceanographic Magazine and Science Magazine and in numerous local, national, and international publications in both print and film. It's appeared in grant proposals, in conservation reports, and in classrooms. A lot of our work has been recognized in international contests. We've won an Emmy Award. And I mention that not because the awards are the point, but because recognition is evidence that the images are working and that they're reaching people outside of the conservation bubble, which is probably the most important thing. I'm not most proud of the awards, I'm proud of the reach. It's when a small organization emails and asks if they can use an image for the grant application or in a school presentation. The answer is always yes. I'm not motivated by money, I'm motivated by message. And these images exist to be used and shared freely. That's what intentional work does. It outlives the moment it was made. It travels to rooms that I'll never be in. It makes arguments that I'll never hear and reaches people that I'll probably never meet. So for educators, every student in your classroom has a tool. A phone camera, a sketchbook, a design program, a way with words. The question is whether they're using it intentionally or just using it. Photography, art, writing, design, these are not soft skills sitting at the edge of STEAM. They're how science reaches people. They're how data becomes a story someone actually cares about. Teach your students to be intentional with what they make, not just technically proficient, intentional. To ask, what do I want someone to feel when they encounter this? What space am I leaving for them to think in? What am I pointing the camera at and why? That discipline, that question is the whole job. Whether you're a conservation photographer, a scientist writing a paper, a student building a presentation, or a teacher designing a lesson. But conservation photography isn't decoration for science. It's how the science reaches people who will never read the paper, never visit the sanctuary, never see the debris in person. And for educators, I ask that you teach your students that how they communicate their findings is just as important as the findings themselves. Teach them restraint alongside reach and teach them that the most powerful frame is often the one where they are not the center of it. The seal didn't know what it is next to, and we do. This is what knowing looks like. Yeah, thank you.
Andy, I think there's a button. Yeah, right there. Stop
Yeah.
there.
Got it.
Okay, so I think the symposium team said we're gonna give these guys until 11:10, since we started late. But I do want to open up the floor for any questions for the PMDP team.
I have a couple, but I'll narrow it. As each of you talked, I was thinking like James, I was like, oh, so many of our kids love to just do the hard work, love the water. Like they would see this and be like, how can I go? So how do we bring that into the space here? So maybe we can help lessen the number of nets you're finding, for example, or something like that. So I guess my question there is like, what does that look like here with students here? And that continued as like Derek and Andy, you talk, I hear like design thinking, and that's what you guys do is a perfect example of that. And then Andy, like the same of so many of our kids are interested in photography, but not in the way that you just presented it. So as I'm hearing all of this amazing stuff, I was just wondering, what does that look like here with students, whether we visit you or you come into classroom spaces?
Yeah, Andy, I can take the first part of this question. But Tammy, thank you very much for your question. We would love to speak with your students at Kailua High School. You guys are right down the road, so we could either do it at the school or you guys are welcome to come to our warehouse here at Papahānaumokuākea Industrial Park. But yeah, the one thing we want to do with students is just to inspire them to want to make a difference. And so when we started our project, or our organization, we named ourselves the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Project versus program because we have an end goal in mind, and that's that this issue of marine debris won't affect us anymore. But I think what we always try and do is talk about the place and falling in love with the place and having a relationship with the place, because if you have love for something, it's really easy to want to protect it. And so I think we can also inspire those to want to take care of our local beaches here on Oahu. It could be, the park that they want to build on, or, it could be anything that you fall in love with, you're going to want to protect. And so we hope that we can be a vessel for inspiration. And yeah, we recruit every 2 years for our field team. And so we put our recruitments every 2 years in about January, February timeframe. So this next one's going to come up in January, February. You do have to be an adult, so at least 18 years old. The employment period is between June through October to join our field team. Everything is paid, so it's all paid work. 2 months of paid work, and where we invest almost $250,000 into training up a cohort to operate small boats, to do remote medical training, to do free diving training, to work around cranes, to do scientific data collection, and then we go out there, do a couple practice runs here in Kaneohe Bay, which is a really good analog for Papahānaumokuākea. And then we're able to take these cohorts out for 2 back-to-back 4-week trips. And so 4 weeks out in the field where we clean up half of the southern half of Papahānaumokuākea. We come back, we get rid of our debris through many different channels. 2 weeks to rest your body, to kind of regroup, and then we go out there for about 4 weeks again. So from the beginning of June through mid to end October is when we employ a full range of students. We've had anywhere from 18 years old all the way to almost probably 49 years old on our team. And so we're willing to work with whoever's really passionate and has the drive to want to work with us.
Yeah, thanks, James. I think when we talk about a photography aspect, the most important advice that I've ever gotten was just to be there and have a camera. So there's a lot of opportunities here and all around to practice. And if there's a local event happening, whether that's a beach cleanup or cleaning up a local fish pond or trail maintenance, showing up and using those opportunities to kind of insert yourself into the community and then also provide value to the community by just taking pictures. The reason why I like so many of my pictures, I have amazing subjects. I have amazing things to shoot, and it's stuff that I'm passionate about. So if people find something that they're passionate about and they show up with a camera and then just take a million pictures, all different angles, and find your style, find what you like, and find what messages uh, are happening in there. And that could be, I mean, that could be a family barbecue, really. It's all about having a camera with you and just taking that opportunity to use that time as like practice. If the end result is people that want to make money with their pictures, that want to be a portrait photographer for a magazine, it's great. I mean, you have endless supply of people in different conditions, inside, outside, bright light, at night, by the water, in the water. Like all of these things have so much value for learning. And just like anything, the more practice you get and the more opportunity you have to shoot stuff in the moment, the better you'll be at the end of it. Yeah, thanks, Tammy.
Thank you.
We got a question in the chat from Lisa, but just wanted to reach out. I know we didn't put our contact information in there, but our emails are at pmdphawaii.org. So pmdphawaii.org. And it's either James at, Andy at, or Derek at. And so I'll put that in the chat as well. So if you have any outreach opportunities or you see us fitting well into some curriculum, we would love to come visit your school, meet the students, or do anything remotely, especially for the outer islands. Would love to engage with the educators and the students.
I have a question for Derek, actually. A couple questions. What is a quartermaster? I had a lot of people ask me what that is. And then the second question is, when you're coming up with these gadgets, do you just have an idea in mind, or do you have like physics concepts you're drawing upon? Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody knows what a quartermaster is. That's the beauty of calling yourself that. It's not my job title. I just made it up, and then you just apply it to whatever you want. And then the nets themselves, like for instance, cutting the nets, like the ideas for cutting the nets. The net itself is not a real hard material. It's like a soft plastic. It's the tricky thing is that there's not tension to it, and it's out in the salt water, and so there's some other confounding variables. But there's any number of things that would work. I mean, we have a whole flip chart of and people literally said samurai sword. And you know what? If we pursued samurai sword, you could cut the nets with the samurai sword. I'm positive of it. It doesn't seem like the most professional way that we're going to go about it, and so we opted not to do that. But sure, yeah, I mean, you can have any sort of idea, and I think, yeah, they're all worth pursuing to some end. And I guess that's a great thing for whether you're to kindergarten to 12th grade or a full-grown old guy like me, is that you could come up with an idea, start to sketch it out, and then, yeah, and then start to try to make it a reality. Like once you start to add a detail here or there, or you see how things fit together or whatever. Just a little at a time. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would like to hear from some of the teachers there also, if that's analogous to either any of their STEM projects or a project in general, a teaching. I mean, I guess that's how teaching works, right? You come up with a basic and then you build on that.
I have another question. I think people are being shy right now. In what ways are the reefs of Papahānaumokuākea different than the main Hawaiian Islands? And since you guys train down here, how does that translate to up in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands?
Well, they're pretty healthy and vibrant, and not all of our reefs on Oahu are. So, we know we're really privileged to be able to see that. But it's also, there are some different species and stuff, but some of it is fairly similar to, like James said, if you could imagine a Kaneohe Bay, but it's like crystal clear water and there's like ahi swimming through it or something like that. It's somewhat similar environment. And so it's just really shallow and really far out there. And so I think that's a lot of the things that we take into account, like James mentioned, $250,000 training the people because you want to make sure that you head off any problem rather than try to deal with it on the back end, which we're also trained to deal with that. But you want to be really proficient with your boating and your diving and your teamwork just because of the remoteness of the thing. I mean, that's a thing that really stands out to me when we're up there. You know, we almost never see another ship or another person or anything going on. I don't know, James or Andy have anything to add.
Yeah, sorry, I was typing into the chat, so I didn't really hear the question. But I will say qualitatively, I've been working up in Papahānaumokuākea every year since 2011. So this is my 16th year in Papahānaumokuākea, and I've actually seen it change over time. You know, I first was a Hawaiian monk seal researcher as a biologist, and then worked as a coral reef ecologist, and then as a marine debris technician, and now being able to do marine debris work. But been anywhere from land to shallow water to outside the reef in deep water. And so I've been able to see all different habitats. And I think, unfortunately, like with climate change, I know it's a bit of a controversial subject, but with ocean warming and ocean acidification, it's just becoming pretty damaging to the coral reef. So what was once like very vibrant purple and yellow Montipora corals, like kind of spread across all different places, you've seen them kind of deteriorate over time and become a lot of rubble. I will say qualitatively that I have not seen the fish species or the wildlife really decrease, and so that's really good to know. But yeah, I think we're just trying to see how resilient Papahānaumokuākea is. You know, we're talking about coral resiliency versus coral restoration or coral recovery, and I think we're almost at that tipping point where we have to really start prioritizing recovery of these reefs versus seeing how resilient they can be towards climate change. Also, I didn't know the question, so hopefully I answered some part
Okay,
of that question.
I will repeat it, but I think you did a really good job. The main question is, in what ways are the reefs of Papahānaumokuākea different than the main Hawaiian Islands? And since you guys, I mean, this is a totally separate question, but when you guys train your technicians, do you guys like stage a net in the water for them to practice?
No, so we do
Yeah.
not. And so they don't actually get to do the real deal until you get out there. And
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of it is that we just don't want to do any more damage on the
Mm,
reef or anything here in Papahānaumokuākea or here in the main Hawaiian Islands. So we go up there and actually just try and be action based and solve the problem up there. But we do have little net samples that have little like cards on them that says this is a trawl net that is 9 feet by 7 feet, and then they learn how to collect the data, and then we actually do habitat data there. So is it hard bottom coral? Is it rubble? Is it sand? What's the depths? What is the buoyancy of the net? We practice all of that here, but we don't actually get to lift until we're out there. And so I think people are surprised, at least the first year, how heavy these nets can be. And, you know, prior to a lot of the engineering solutions that Derek has helped develop, we've had to cut these nets into 500 to 800 pound chunks. And so a big net might have to be chopped up 5, 6 times before you can load it bit by bit into the boat. So they don't really feel how heavy it is. To go back to your previous question, I will say that the animals are very, very curious over there. We're talking about a place that has 54% of fish biomass as apex predators versus here in the main Hawaiian Islands, you may only have 3 to 6% apex predators. So just a really healthy apex predator dominated ecosystem with lots of big fish, lots of big sharks. Whereas here in the main Hawaiian Islands, you have a lot of herbivores, and a lot of these fish, they see people diving and they're worried about being shot here in the main Hawaiian Islands. You know, do we get speared versus over there? They've never seen a spear fisherman. They've never probably seen people swimming around them, especially at a place like Kamoko Kamaho'ali'i, where we're pretty much the only organization that does any active work out there because there's no emergent land. So there's no way for the Hawaiian monk seal research team or the sea turtle team to actually go study some of the biological life up there. So I would say that the wildlife respond differently, but also the abundance and the biodiversity is also insane. You know, a lot of our team, we get jaded, I think, by going up there, and like you'll see like dolphins jumping and manta rays splashing and, you know, like big schools of sharks. And 10 years in, it's like, oh, very cool. But it's really cool to be able to bring new people every single year to see that excitement and to see like a fuel to their fire. And then our job here at PMDP is to not only bring the place to the people, but bring the people to the place, so they can become emerging leaders in conservation or research or education. And we know they're not going to stick with us forever, but at least they can take their experiences with us and go to another group and help lead protection for all of Hawaii, whether that's, Mauka to Makai.
I have a question for any of you, I guess. How closely do you guys work with any of the research teams that go up there? And do you take requests on projects if they need marine debris removal for access to a specific research location or anything like that?
Yeah, I can take this one. So we work specifically in Papahānaumokuākea. So we work with a lot of the federal and state managers that work up there. But all of our work is about protecting Papahānaumokuākea. It's not about like we are marine debris researchers or, like we're not very specific to the marine debris side. So we do conduct a lot of ancillary projects for state and federal managers. I didn't talk about my background, but I actually worked 10 years at NOAA Fisheries in the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center as the operations manager. And so I have a lot of connections and understand that the importance of the work. And so we do coral reef bleach watch for the state of Hawaii. We go out there and our team led by Andy and some of our other Hawaiian monk seal researchers will disentangle seals and turtles. We will also, for the weaned pups that have not been tagged, flipper tagged, we help restrain and flipper tag them and collect data for NOAA Fisheries. And then alongside fisheries, we also work with the ORNR side or the NOS side, the National Ocean Service. So we collect a lot of temperature data and also report all of our data to the National NOAA Marine Debris Program. And so they have all of our data within their data set. And then, of course, with Fish and Wildlife Service, we help with whatever they need with seabird or terrestrial habitat stuff as well.
Okay. What other questions do people have? We have about 5 minutes left. Roland says, I teach 3rd grade. I want students to understand marine debris. Work is not only for people who go into the ocean. What STEM-based ways students can help from land or a challenge?
I think Derek has a couple ideas, but we've worked with a couple different robotics groups from anywhere from, I think it was 1st grade all the way through high school. And it's more about, how can you build robotics for conservation? And although our work requires human power to actually be in the water because of the wilderness that we work in, we're talking about shallow reefs that are very sensitive to any kind of damage from robotics or heat or sound or whatever that may be. And so we don't actively use robotics yet, but we are definitely transitioning into that world. And so Derek kind of touched upon it. We use satellite detection, so using satellite imagery towards detecting differences in pixels over time. And so we have thousands of square miles of very shallow coral reef habitat that we would not survey because it doesn't have the appropriate habitat like the finger coral to catch a lot of this derelict fishing net. However, when a big one rolls in and it had already kind of destroyed a reef, it can settle there. And so they can help us find derelict fishing nets on large swaths of reefs. And my oldest daughter's in 2nd grade, and they are always asking on how they can do, citizen science kind of work or science kind of work. And I think ours is to inspire them to want to use engineering and science and technology for something meaningful and purposeful versus making money. So yeah, any kind of robotics projects that Derek may have in mind, I think would be
I think James is right. In the interest of time, I'll just make it really brief. But I think kids love sketching. I mean, I love sketching. Everybody does. But you don't have to necessarily even make the thing. As long as you're starting to think about it in 3rd grade and sketching it out, any sort of robot that has a magnet on it or whatever, let them run wild. And then the other thing that's kind of interesting, because you mentioned that it's not just for people who go in the ocean. And it's true, and it's not just for people in Hawaii or anywhere. One of the really interesting things about a lot of the debris we get, most of the debris we get, is that it came from somewhere else. You remember James's slide of the the gyre. And so that could be interesting for the students as well. There's a lot of work looking at debris and analyzing, it'll be a bottle with a label in I don't know what language, but it's cool to see that. It's not cool, but it's really fascinating to see that kind of different stuff and imagine the life of this piece of plastic or something like that that floated around and it ended up there. So those could be interesting things for kids to parse out also.
And I know we're running out of time. I got like 1 minute, but I wanted to address Pikaki's question about the nets. Oh, sorry. Did I cut somebody off? All right, cool. Yeah,
no, I just wanted to say thanks. Thank you. That's it.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, just wanted to address the question that Pikake brought up, which is what happens to the nets after you bring them back to the main Hawaiian Islands? And so that's a challenge that we've always had. We would love your guys' input in developing creative solutions, but the nets that we come back with are heavily biofouled. They're typically made up of conglomerates of different net types, net material, different mesh sizes, thicknesses. So it's really hard for a lot of different organizations to separate them and to make them repurposeful or reusable. If Hawaii had a huge trawl industry, I'm pretty sure we could turn these nets right back to the trawl fishermen to go trawl fish again. I mean, I think that would be the best. I mean, not trawl fishing is not good, but I mean, to be able to repurpose them without having to transform them into something else. But we do turn them over to groups that are able to separate them, shred them, and then create more products using recycled material. And so up until this year, we had a partnership with the Center for Marine Debris Research, which is through Hawaii Pacific University. And they've been taking our nets and incorporating them into roads here. If you guys didn't know that the asphalt needs virgin plastics to make them help bind. And so to eliminate the use of virgin plastics, that we've been able to use marine debris into the roads. They've made cement ties and plastic lumber. And with my time managing this project at NOAA Fisheries, we've been able to make like building blocks through biofusion, skateboards, sunglasses, soap dispenser bottles. We've given our debris to the elephants at the zoo to play with, to educators who want to use it for education, artists who want to use it for art. But the goal is to be able to process it or at least take care of it here in Hawaii, because being able to or having to ship it across the Pacific, 2,400 miles to the nearest landmass that has the facilities to process these at a large scale is just hazardous or damaging to the environment. And so we try and do what we can, although it is small scale here. But we would love to find another solution, because if whatever we can't repurpose, we have to turn over to H-Power Covanta, and they incinerate it to generate steam, and then that generates electricity for homes on Oahu. And so, every year we come back with about 200,000 pounds, and that generates enough electricity for about 70 homes for a year here on Oahu.
Okay. Mahalo. Thank you so much for answering my questions and everybody else's questions. And thank you for speaking today. That was really great. Can we all give PMDP a round of applause? Okay, so I think we have to transition now into the next space. You're welcome to stay in this space if you want to be in the advocacy workshop. I think PMDP put their website and their emails in chat if you guys want to reach out to them to do school type things. But unless there's any last thoughts, mahalo and ahuio.